Good morning and welcome as we once again invite you to listen to the words of today's gospel from St. Matthew and see what Jesus might be saying to us. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. Amen, I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or the smallest part of a letter will pass from the law, until all things have taken place. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do so will be called last in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever obeys and teaches these commandments will be called the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." The Gospel of the Lord. It's interesting, Jesus uses the law and the prophets as the basis of his statement in today's Gospel. They were the very foundation of Judaism, those who believed in the Jewish faith, those who were members, those who were qualified to be called children of Israel, had the laws not only of Moses given by God, but over the centuries had added over 6,000 laws, and the rules, 600, and all the rules and regulations that they lived by became so numerous that often they were burdensome. And yet Jesus does not dismiss it, because law are the basis of our society. They are the guidelines, they are the standards, minimum though they may be, of what it means to live together as individuals, but also as community. And it stipulates the qualifications of membership. And so law becomes very important. But Jesus comes and says, I haven't come to abolish it, but to fulfill it. That in and of itself, law does not nurture or feed. It rather keeps minimum, so to speak. The law of our own country does that. Not to be the whole being and end all of all things, but rather guidelines. And membership depends, I guess, on citizenship. But in the beginning of our country, being members of the United States under the Constitution meant that you were a man, property owner, not a slave, not Jew, not Catholic. Interesting. Not this all equality and liberty and fraternity that we perhaps idealize. But then are we any different today? The law states minimum, and we hold to that as long as we're within those who are eligible. And those who aren't, we tend to keep out and look down on and even show prejudice towards. Jesus comes and says, I've come to fulfill the law. And the law of God is beyond religion or nationality or race or culture or externals of any kind, although they may have their place. That Jesus comes and says the law of God applies to all his creatures. The entire human family are united in God as creator, God who is love. That the whole world in which we live is our responsibility in relationship to one another. And so if we listen to the law of God as we understand it today, as we see by looking around in the world in which we live, it means we have to make an effort to move out of our limited concept, our definitions, our restrictions, our requirements. If we want to be faithful to God, if we want to live out the commandment of Jesus, then I have to look at God as my Father and everyone as brother and sister. And I have to try to overcome my prejudice, my fears. I have to be careful that in God's eyes there are no qualifications except to be. That the law, the land in which we live, the world in which we live, we have to be conscious and careful to hand on to others that are going to come after us, because we're responsible for them too, to some degree. The period in which we're living, the quarantine, and also the rebellion that's going on about the taking of Black lives, calls us all, uncomfortable though it may be, to realize certain realities, that we're not just isolated in my family or in this country, but that we are vulnerable as human beings, that we have to be conscious and aware, and that we're dependent on each other for health and for happiness, and even the pursuit of happiness. And that we also are reminded, at least I find, that in this moment of challenge, of protest, that I wonder how prejudiced I am, even if it be unconscious, that I have to ask myself, am I really living out the commandment of Jesus? Do I believe that he came to fulfill the law, that there are no boundaries, there are no qualifications, and there are no restrictions, that all are members of God's family, all are created, the people in our world and the world in which we live. And I have to show each in their own way respect, honor, and indeed even love. That's the challenge. That's the family. That's the ultimate law above and beyond national laws or customs or qualifications or even religious descriptions. That if we're not living the law of Jesus, if we're not loving and open to all, if we find ourselves being restrictive and labeling, if we find we're exclusive instead of inclusive, then I have to ask myself, do I really believe the words of this gospel? I have come, Jesus says, not to abolish the law, but rather to bring it to fulfillment, that everyone and everything in this world is to be loved and respected as gifts from God. We hope that today you continue to pray for one another, that you continue to be safe and healthy, that you and your family members are likewise healthy and happy. And hopefully we see some daylight at the end, that we're in phase 2, whatever that means. But at least it's a beginning.